I checked the parking lot from the steps of the city complex where I stood to make sure her SUV was still there. I knew she had arrived just a few minutes ago, and she should be good for another 10 to 20 minutes before leaving, but I wanted to be certain. Her call to him mentioned that she wanted to talk about my upcoming trip. He was probably sitting at the counter, talking to her right now, making plans for tonight when I would supposedly be out of town for 3 days. For days for them to do whatever they had planned. Yes, he would stay and chat with her. I was just anxious, and, if truth be told, a little excited too. I just wanted this plan to go perfectly since I had been working on it for nearly a month now. I looked again for Tom's car and was rewarded with the sight of his Mustang pulling into the parking lot, the smoke from the exhaust signaling its arrival. It was a piece of junk in my eyes, but to him, it was a beloved classic, and now it carried important news. Tom parked, awkwardly extricating his massive bulk from the too small car, reached back inside to grab a worn briefcase, and then, after slamming the door twice to get it to stay shut, walked toward me. The blinding white teeth in his red face showed him smiling, and it was all I needed to see to let myself return the smile. He raised the briefcase in triumph as he climbed the steps to where I was standing. He reached me, pulled out a sheath of papers, and handing them to me, laughed. "This has cooked her goose, that's for sure. It's all here, just as you wanted. Sam is right behind me with his copies. The cops are right behind him, and they agreed to follow his lead. Just a few minutes, and you'll get what you've been waiting for." I took the papers he handed me, checked to make sure they were what I expected, and then smiled back at him. "Perfect. Sam has the official copies for both of them. He's got them both just as you planned. Relax, John. It'll be over very quickly." As I nodded, he took one last chance to ask me, "Are you sure, John? Are you damn sure this is what you want? There's still time to change your mind. Be certain." "Yes, I'm sure. I'm very damn sure. Our life till now." Natalie Spencer and I were married 14 years ago this month. We met and fell in love in high school, and then dated off and on through college. I went to Michigan State, and she went to the University of Louisville. We both dated others during college, but we always reconnected during the holidays. We both graduated in 2003 and moved back to our hometown of Cleveland. Natalie had a degree in accounting and got a job working for the county in the finance office. I was an engineer and went to work for my dad in his construction business. My degree was in civil engineering, so I began to slowly take over his responsibilities with the idea of him retiring and me eventually running the whole operation. That was fine with me since I had always wanted to do what he did, run my own company and build things. My name is John Harrison. My dad's business is Harrison Construction, and we focus mainly on industrial construction. He rarely bothers with small jobs and bids only on those that will keep him busy for years. Those were the big ones, and there were plenty of them around. When I graduated, he started me working on the bids, the part of the job that made us successful. A good bid was necessary to make a profit and to get a foot in the door. Too high, no chance in hell. Too low, good chance to work, but a sure loss of profit. A good bid would open the door for the job and for many more down the road. I learned from a pro. Natalie and I were dating, and as we both settled into our jobs, talk of marriage was inevitable. We danced around it for several months, but I finally asked her to marry me one sunny day in May. She accepted. We planned for an October wedding, and our life as a couple began the day in 2004 when we pledged our love and devotion to each other for the rest of our lives. We took a week-long honeymoon in the Bahamas, where we learned that intimacy was something we both enjoyed. I was surprised to find she was fairly adventurous in bed. Once she realized that she liked it, she was eager to try everything she had read about or heard from some of her friends at work. I was happy to go along with her exploration, and we tried everything I could imagine at least once. When we returned and started our life as a married couple, we continued to be intimate as often as we had the energy, and things became comfortable for us. We were in love, and our lives were almost perfect. We planned on starting a family later, once we felt secure in our lives, but in the meantime, we had fun. We had been married for 6 years when one night, when we were being intimate, I asked her a question: "Do you want kids? And if you do, how many?" She looked at me, her eyes glazed over with desire, and nodded her head affirmatively. She stayed that way for several minutes, then began to subside. She loved this position since it gave her full control. I was along for the ride, but it was a night I thoroughly enjoyed. I loved to see her this way, her face flushed with pleasure and contentment, and her eyes glazed with passion. She looked at me, a smile on her lips as she finally moved off me to collapse beside me. God, that was wonderful. I love you, John. I truly love you. She reached over to kiss me tenderly, one hand sliding down my body. Her eyes told me she was being truthful, and yes, I want kids. I think we should start as soon as possible. Your job is secure with your dad, and I have my choice of a lot of assignments. I could work until I got pregnant, take time off to have our baby, and then go back when he or she is old enough to put into daycare. That's what you were thinking? Actually, it was exactly what I was thinking, and I told her. As I was telling her how much I wanted kids, she added, well, it's too late tonight since I'm still on the pill, but I can stop in 6 weeks. Till then, we have to practice and practice and practice. She just laughed, and said she was so tired she just wanted to sleep in my arms. Natalie stopped her pills on schedule, and we began our quest for the all-American family. It took almost 7 months, but finally, she was pregnant. Our first child, Anna Rose, was on the way. We named her Anna after Natalie's mom and Rose after mine. Natalie did all the right things to make sure she and the baby were healthy, and when Anna was born, she was perfect. Natalie made a fantastic mother. She took care of all 6 of us, and life was wonderful. Anna grew quickly, and when she turned 6, Natalie began to look into daycare. She found a great place. She and I vetted it and pronounced it okay. Anna started soon after, and Natalie went back to work. When Anna turned 4, we decided to try for a second child. Our intimate life had climbed back to where it was before Natalie got pregnant, and I hesitated to give that up, but it was time. We began trying as often as we could until Natalie announced that we were going to have our second. I was pleased and excited and told her that we had to get as much intimacy in before she started to get uncomfortable. She agreed, and we made love as often as we had before, but now with a little more urgency. That was when we discovered several new things that we enjoyed and added to our repertoire. We found out that this one was going to be a boy, and that made both of us quite happy. We wanted one of each and had decided to continue until we had both boys and girls. Now, we would be the perfect family husband and wife with 4 children, one of each. We waited for our new addition and were delighted when he came healthy and happy. We named him Jake Thomas after my father and hers. Life was perfect. As Jake grew, Natalie stayed home and took care of both of our kids, but after Jake turned 4.5, Natalie was ready to go back to work. I had no problem with that, and she began to prepare things. It was about that time that my perfect life got just a little less perfect. We got new neighbors. Steve and Karen Duncan moved in next door, and for some reason, Karen and Natalie quickly became good friends. I liked Steve, but he and I never became best friends. Steve was a banker, and he and I shared few interests, but Karen and Natalie became close, and soon Karen would be at our place when I came home, or I would find Natalie next door talking and drinking coffee with Karen. It wasn't like it was a problem, but for some reason, I found Karen to be someone I distrusted on sight. I had no reason for that, but it was true nevertheless. Natalie went back to work at the city complex and was now working in the building permit department. That wasn't too bad since I would see her fairly often when I went in for some permit or other requirement. Things settled back into routine. Natalie was back to her lively self, and our intimate life was full and rich. We celebrated our 16th wedding anniversary, and life seemed great for a while. Unbeknownst to me, trouble started when Karen talked Natalie and me into throwing a party to invite some of our friends over to meet her and Steve. I had no problem with the idea and agreed to invite some of my construction buddies over. Karen had a short list of people she and Steve knew, and the party was arranged. We set aside one Saturday afternoon and planned a barbecue. I took the kids over to my mom and dad's for the afternoon, and the party was on. We had a good turnout, and I introduced Karen and Steve to many of my friends. I took the time to include Natalie since she had not met a lot of them. Things were going great until I noticed David Jones, a trucking contractor that I worked with sometimes. I hadn't invited him, so I wondered how he got here. I didn't care much for Mark. His reputation for bending the law was pretty well known, and I knew he had a reputation as a ladies' man, not caring much if they were married or available. He was talking with some of the ladies, and I figured he would be taking names while he was here. It was sometime later when Natalie came over to me and pulled me aside to ask, Who is that good-looking man in the leather jacket and tight jeans? He's hot. That's David Jones, and stay away from him. He's never met a woman he wouldn't chase after. Married or single makes no difference to him. He's a real piece of work. Why did you invite him if you don't like him? She didn't seem to believe me, not surprising since she didn't know him. I didn't, and I have no idea who did. But he's here. I started to go back to the grill, but Natalie was having none of that. Introduce me and Karen. I want to meet him and see what's so hot about him. See what the ladies see in him. Come on. She pulled me toward Karen, and once she got there, she corralled her as well and started toward Mark. I had little choice but to follow. Hey there, John. Heard you were throwing a party. Connie invited me to come along. Hope you don't mind. Mark was talking to me but looking at Karen and Natalie. His smile was pretty big, and I wanted to punch his face in, but I had no reason. Sure, Mark, no problem. I want you to meet Natalie, my wife, and her friend Karen Duncan from next door. Ladies, meet David Jones. Introductions made, I moved away and went back to my grill. I watched them from the corner of my eye as I continued to provide the burgers and hot dogs while Steve took care of the drinks. Things were going pretty well, and I forgot about Mark and the ladies as I got dragged into a conversation. It was almost an hour later when Natalie came back to stand beside me and help with the food. I noticed that she kept looking over toward Mark frequently, but I gave it little thought. The party was in full swing, and I had little time. Later that afternoon, when people were stopping to say thanks as they left, I looked again for Natalie and found her standing off to one side talking with Mark. They seemed to be involved in something rather serious as they were talking quietly and standing very close. I didn't care much for that and called over to Natalie to come help me. Natalie looked at me, stepped back away from Mark, and then said something more before walking toward me. I was distracted by another couple leaving, and when I looked again, Mark was gone, and Natalie was talking to Karen. I saw nothing much after that, and the party broke up with people heading home to pick up their kids. Steve and Karen were helping to clean up, and we were able to go inside before it got dark. The party seemed to be a success, and Steve said he had met several people who he thought would be worth inviting over. We said our good nights, and they went home while we went inside. Natalie said very little the rest of the evening, cleaning up leftovers, washing dishes, filling several trash bags with paper plates and cups. I went in and sat down in my chair to relax. My feet standing at that grill all day had done a number on my feet. I think I fell asleep almost as soon as I sat down since I remembered nothing much until Natalie woke me later to go up to bed. I followed her, dragging but contented. I went to bed thinking Natalie would be as tired as I was and would want nothing more than to sleep for hours, but I was wrong. As soon as the light went out, she attacked me, her hands all over me and her mouth working its way down my body, promising a warm, tender haven. Before I knew what was happening, she was ready, not wasting any time with foreplay. I held on as her climax approached and watched her as her body reacted in pure passion. I looked at her face. Her eyes were still closed, her face still showing signs of pleasure. I was confused, not understanding where this surge of desire had come from. I wasn't concerned at that time, just confused. She often reacted this way to some of the things we did, but tonight she was already aroused before coming to bed. That was what was bothering me. Chris, baby, what was that all about? Where did that come from? She looked at me in surprise, and then her face turned red in embarrassment. She slid off me, rolled over, and sat up on the side of the bed with her back to me, and I was surprised to see that she was crying. I sat up myself, reached for her only to have her stand up and move away from me. She didn't reply but went into the bathroom and closed the door. I sat there confused and worried. I decided she wouldn't welcome me if I tried to go to her, so I just rolled over and lay back down. It must have been 20 minutes or less before I was asleep. Sunday morning, Natalie and I woke to the sound of Jake and Anna playing one of their games. I looked at the clock to see it was almost 9 in the morning, and I had slept straight through. I pushed myself up and went in to take a shower and try to get my legs under me. Half an hour later, I walked downstairs to find Natalie and Karen sitting at the kitchen table talking quietly. As I walked in, they stopped, and Natalie rose to get me a cup of coffee. I sat down, Karen watching me but saying nothing. Ordinarily, I would welcome that, but this morning it seemed ominous. Natalie put the cup down in front of me, looked over at Karen, who then rose and left. Natalie waited until she was gone before speaking. I'm sorry about last night. You must have thought I was crazy. It was all a big mistake. She walked around the table and sat down opposite me. What do you mean? Mistake? I'm lost. I needed the caffeine, but I doubted that would give me any enlightenment. Karen and I and some of the girls were having fun and making jokes. We were being silly and talking about our husbands and about intimacy. I just got a little carried away and jumped you when we went to bed. I just sort of lost it and never even thought about you. I'm so sorry, honey. I really am. I was so embarrassed I just went in the bathroom and tried to calm down. When I finally came out, you were asleep. I thought about that, decided there was more to it, but that Natalie obviously wanted to forget it, so I let it go. That's all right, Chris. It was fine. I was so damn tired I don't think I would have enjoyed it anyway. Good. I'll make it up to you tonight. You can count on that, big boy. She was now happy that whatever it was no longer seemed to be a problem. Maybe not. Then again, maybe it was. Nothing more happened until a week later when Natalie asked me if I would have any objection to her going out with Karen for some drinks and conversation. They were going to invite a couple of the other women Karen met and just try to establish some contacts. She said they would just be gone a couple of hours, and if I could watch the kids, she would be so grateful. I didn't understand it then, of course, but that was the day my life changed for the worse. Sure, honey, it might be good for you to make some new friends other than Karen, is what I was thinking to myself. I still didn't trust her. Good. I think I'll call Karen and set it up for Friday night. Is that okay? Fine with me. We'll do something with the kids to keep us occupied while you're out having fun. I smiled to show I was just kidding. She returned the smile, but not with the enthusiasm I expected. Maybe she was worried about how I was taking it. Well, okay then. It wouldn't hurt to let her know I didn't have to like her going out without us. Friday night came, and Natalie dressed conservatively for her evening out. I don't think I ever described Natalie. She was cute, with short auburn hair and hazel eyes. Her face was sort of round, with high cheekbones and a small dimple in her chin. She was short, only about 53, and never wore heels. Her body was okay, just a little on the heavy side, but still nice to look at. She was no beauty, but I loved her just as she was. That night she dressed in slacks and a blouse with a sweater jacket over that. We were talking in the kitchen when Karen knocked on the door. Natalie said goodnight to me and the kids and walked out the door to meet Karen. So began the end of my life. The night out with Karen and their friends became a routine that happened once or twice a month at first, then increased to once a week. I still watched the kids, and we had found several nice places to go for fun. One was an indoor recreation place with soft inflatable slides and tunnels, and that bed of large balls that they jumped into. They both loved that one. We also found the zoo, the aquarium, and Chuck E. Cheese's. I began to learn more about my kids than ever. Actually, I loved the night out for that reason. The first difference I saw was that our intimate life began to change. At first, Natalie would come home and jump me, anxious to make up for her absence. Then slowly, I noticed the lack of intimacy on those nights. Then the frequency began to decline to 6 times a week, then 4, and sometimes even less. Natalie also seemed different, more quiet, and less apt to want to try new things in bed, and she stopped doing some of the things we used to enjoy. When I tried to talk about it, Natalie would get angry and defensive. I tried to be as kind and loving as I knew how, but it made no difference. Something was going on. I began to try to listen in on phone conversations between Natalie and Karen. When the phone rang, I would wait a few minutes and then pick up one of the extension phones to listen in. I think Natalie caught on early, and I heard nothing out of the ordinary. But if I walked into the room when she was talking, she would stop, then begin again louder but saying nothing unusual. She knew I was listening. That gave me an idea, and I determined to try something. The next day, I took some time and found a Radio Shack. I talked to one of the young men working there who seemed to understand the gadgets they sold. I told him I wanted to tap my own phone to see what my daughter was saying to her boyfriend or girlfriend. I made up a story about drugs, and he bought it. He showed me some equipment that he said would do the job. He showed me how to connect it and how to use it. I bought what he recommended. Now to install it. I went home one afternoon when I knew Natalie was working. I found the phone wire leading into the house from the garage, had a moment of panic when I had to cut it and reconnect it to the small panel on the back of the recorder, but succeeded. Damn, those wires were small. I connected the device as the young man instructed and put the recorder behind a shelf that held old magazines. We hadn't moved those boxes in years. I set the device to record all conversations onto a digital memory stick. Mr. Radio Shack told me that tiny little stick would hold up to 8 hours of conversations and that the recorder would turn itself on and off based on sound. I could play those conversations back using the recorder or on any computer with a USB connection. I finished the job and headed back to work. Although I checked the stick several times, the only thing I heard was routine conversations with Karen. I was around most of the time, so I knew she was being very careful. I decided to make myself visibly scarce that evening, so she would feel free to talk to Karen. She had not been coming over as often lately. I wondered why. After dinner that evening, I announced to Natalie that I was taking the kids to the indoor gym so they could bounce some energy off. When I asked her if she wanted to come, she declined, pleading work around the house. That was fine with me, and we set off, planning for at least 4 hours away. I enjoyed my time with them, as I had been doing lately, and wondered if times like this would become a part of my new life, one without Natalie. We came home almost 4.5 hours later, both kids exhausted and ready for bed. I took them up myself and got them put down for the night. When I came back downstairs, Natalie was sitting in the den watching some movie on TV. I decided to check the stick that evening after she went up to bed. All I had to do was wait her out. That was not hard to do lately. She often went up now before I was ready, hoping, I believed, to be asleep before I came up. That way she could avoid being intimate with me. I walked into the small room where we kept the computer and began to write some emails to contacts I had been avoiding. I was still working when she stuck her head in the door to say goodnight. I grunted, waving to let her know I was busy. I continued for the next 10 minutes, knowing that she would be in bed now and trying to fall asleep. I walked into the garage, pulled away one of the boxes, and shut the recorder off. I pulled the stick from the slot and took it back into the room where the computer was waiting. I slipped the stick into one of the USB slots and clicked on the computer. Sure enough, it showed the little stick as a removable hard drive. I double-clicked on the stick and then on an icon that looked like a music symbol. That opened a program I didn't even know I had, and a screen that looked like a movie screen opened up. Almost immediately, a voice began to play. Surprised, I looked closely and found a volume control. I adjusted that so that I could hear clearly, but too low for much to be heard outside the room. "Hey, girl, can you talk?" That was clearly Natalie's voice. "Sure can. What about you? Where's that husband of yours?" "Definitely Karen. He took the kids to someplace to play. I have some time now." "Good. Tom's out again with one of his buddies as usual. He leaves me all the damn time. We need to add another night to our girls' night out." "God, no. It's hard enough now with John having to take care of the kids after working all day. We always did that as a couple. I hate this, but I won't give it up. The last time was something else, wasn't it? God. You were really going at it with the 4 of them. I was going nuts just watching, and I loved it. I just wish it was something I could do with John. It would be so much better. But you know he wouldn't buy into something like that. He'd never go for it. I know. He would never accept it, and if he found out, it would kill him. I'm so damn confused. Well, just be careful and enjoy it. I'm so glad you asked me to join you when Mark asked you out that first time. Why do you decide to go? Damned if I know. I guess he's just so good looking, and when we talked at the party that first time, my pants got so wet that I had to find out what he was like. Stupid, I know. There were more comments, not definitive but very clear if I made some assumptions. I had no proof of what they were talking about, but I knew that both women were involved. I fast-forwarded enough to know that it was just more of the same. Toward the end, I ran it at regular speed. I have another call coming in, and I have to take it. It could be John. They'll see you tomorrow when we go out. Don't call me tonight. Okay? Sure, bye. I was confused since there were no other calls coming in. It sounded like Natalie was getting nervous on the phone, even though I wasn't there. I copied the file to my hard drive and erased the stick for use again. I went back to insert the stick and replace the box. Tomorrow was another day. As I went up to bed, I replayed the conversation over in my head. Nothing definite, but Karen's comment about the 4 of them was making my stomach twist in agony. I had an idea what it meant, and the visions that put in my head were making me sick. It was plain to me, but not real proof. That would have to change. I slipped into bed, Natalie making it seem like she was sleeping, but I knew better. Her breathing sped up when I turned toward her, but I just snuggled down and closed my eyes. She seemed to relax slowly as I made no moves toward her. I fell asleep, my mind overloaded. The following day, I went through the yellow pages and found an ad for a PI. I called and made an appointment for later that afternoon. I finished some outstanding work and completed one bid that was due but begged off discussing it with my guys until the following morning. I left for my appointment, my stomach a wreck, my body in a full panic attack. I drove to a section of town that had seen better days and found the building housing the address I wanted. The building was not much better than the neighborhood it was in, but I paid that no mind. I just needed the PI, not a fancy office. I entered the office on the second floor and found an empty desk where a secretary should sit. In her place, I saw a small sign on the chair that simply had an arrow pointing toward a second door further back. I walked over to that door and knocked. "Come on in. It's open." Inside, I saw a huge man, probably weighing in at over 300 pounds and filling the small room we were in. But his smile showed teeth whiter than any I had seen. In spite of the overall appearance of a less than successful investigator, I was struck with a feeling of competence. I moved in, held out a hand, which he took, and decided this was a man I could trust. "You must be Mr. Harris. My name's John Harrison, and I run this here establishment. Sit down, take a load off. As you can see, I need to sit a lot. Please call me John. Thanks for seeing me so soon. I have questions that I want answers to, and am hoping you can help me. I'll do what I can. Why don't you tell me your questions, then we'll see if we can find your answers." I laid out my concerns and fears and told him I needed proof that my wife was doing what I thought she was doing. I gave him background, the names and addresses of Karen and Steve, and briefly mentioned David Jones as a probable person I wanted investigated. He listened, watching my face carefully the entire time. He made me nervous, but at the same time, optimistic. Strange combination. "So can you help me find out what I need to know?" "Seems simple enough, but I have a question. What about this Morris guy? Seems you want more than to catch him with your wife." "That about right?" "Yes. David Jones has a bad reputation in a lot of things, not only chasing after other men's wives. I want as much dirt on him as I can get. Can you do that?" "Believe it or not, I can do damn near anything you want me to do." "ITLL cost you, though. How do you want to pay? By the day or a complete job?" "Complete job's cheaper in the long run, depending on what I find. I'll do your wife, Mr. Morris, and the other four for a flat $8,500. Otherwise, I work for $500 a day plus expenses. Your choice." I was taken by surprise by the amount but decided quickly that my life was worth more than that, and we were talking about my life. I opted for the full payment and told him so. He appeared to not care much either way, but he asked for a retainer. I wrote him a check for $4,200, which he glanced at then threw in a drawer. "Okay, here's how it works. You give me all the details you have now, and then I'll take it from there. I'll want to stop by your place in a day or so to install some equipment. You need to find a reason for me to go upstairs to your bedrooms and in your garage. Can you do that?" "Should be no problem. I've been wanting to install an alarm system. You could give me an estimate." "How's that?" "Perfect. Now let's get some information so I can start today." I left an hour later, feeling more confident now that I had taken the first steps to find out what was happening. I was still thinking about Jeff's last statement before he let me go. He looked very serious when he asked me directly, "John, are you very sure about this? You can talk to your wife, tell her your suspicions, and try to convince her that an affair is a bad idea. If you never know the truth, you might be able to move on and work it out. But once you know for sure and see evidence of what she's doing, there is rarely any turning back. Your marriage will be over. So I need you to tell me you want me to go ahead. If you say no, I'll give you back your check, and we're done." I told him to go ahead and get my answers. I was certain in my own mind that this had to be done. Why I didn't face her and talk to her, I can't really say for sure. Maybe I should have. But I had made promises to her when we were married, and I had been faithful to her ever since. No one had to talk to me and convince me that my vows were important and should never be broken. Why would I have to talk to her? There was no reason. If she loved me, and if she did, Jeff would find nothing. When I got home, it was earlier than normal. For some reason, I went in the back way rather than my normal side door. When I walked in, I saw Karen sitting in our kitchen talking to Natalie. Neither of them had heard or seen me as I entered, and I made no noise as I carefully walked into the hall leading to the kitchen. I was in stealth mode after my visit to Jeff's office, so I decided to listen in on their conversation. I leaned back against the doorway and listened. I got more than I wanted. Come on, Chris, you know he doesn't know or suspect anything. He thinks we just go out to have a couple of drinks with the girls. That's all. Steve doesn't know anything either, but he just doesn't care. So don't sweat it, girl. I can't help it. I just get the feeling he knows something is different. It's partly my fault. I've been less loving with him lately, and our intimate life is different. I still love being with him, but he seems different now. It scares me. It's in your head, Chris. John doesn't know anything. He trusts you. You know that. Yes, so I cheat him. That's what I give him for trusting me. Oh God, Karen, I have to end this. I love John so much, and I don't know what I would do if he found out. But if you do, you'll never be happy again. He'll never go for what you do with Mark and Tom. You know that, and you'll miss it. I can tell that anyway. I need you to get Tom and Mark for myself too. Karen let out a little laugh and then continued. What if you invite me over to have a little romp with you and John? A real sixsome for him to make it even? God, no. It would kill me to see him with you, or any other woman. God, what a hypocrite I am. I'm going to end it. I have to. Mark won't let you. You know that. He'll use those pictures he took that first time to show John. So any way you look at it, you're better off going along with it for a while until Mark gets bored. Well, yes, I guess it's not like it's a hardship. God, I don't know what he does to me, but I can't walk away. I just can't. Here she laughed, and Karen joined in. Sick to my stomach, I walked quietly back to the back door, went outside, and then came in the side door as always, making noise as I walked into the kitchen. Karen passed me with a pat on the shoulder as she left. I watched her go with a wish for her to drop dead before turning back to Natalie. Where are the kids? I didn't hear them when I came in. Are they home? No, they're with your mom. She wanted to take them out and buy them some new jeans. She's always buying them something. I wish she wouldn't do it so much. She'll spoil them. She had her back to me as she pretended to be washing some dishes. I didn't want to have any kind of conversation now, so I just said, Mom has too much time on her hands since Dad died. You know that. Why would I have to remind her of that? Before I let my anger show, I walked away to go up and change. I went into the bathroom, shut the door, and turned the lock. I turned on the water in the sink and then sat on the commode and let the tears come. This whole day, I had held on to what little control I had, but after talking with Jeff, listening to the conversation with Karen, and seeing Natalie having to avoid facing me, it was too much. I cried as if my world had come to an end, and in a real way, it had. The grief was too much to hold in, and I sat there crying like a child for 15 minutes. I hadn't cried like this since I was a child myself. I couldn't stop. By the time I was done, I was gasping for breath, and my face was wet and sticky. I rose, went to the sink, and splashed water on my face until I felt almost normal. When I finally came back downstairs, my mom was there, and she and the kids showed me what they bought. Anna had a new skirt that she loved, and Jake had new tennis shoes that were autographed by someone, making them cost double what they were worth. I made appreciative noises to the kids, pulled Mom aside, and chastised her for spending too much and spoiling them, and then thanked her for doing so. She was pleased and invited us over for the weekend for a grill out. I told her I would check with Natalie and call. Once she left, I avoided Natalie and spent some time with Jake and Anna. They were playing with their toys and were happy to have me join in. I played with them until it was time for bed. They made the usual noises, but Natalie would not allow that, so they went off to bed. I sat down in my chair and turned on the TV. I just stared at it, not even knowing what I was watching until much later when Natalie came in, snorted as she saw what was on, and changed the channel. She settled down and began watching some show or other while I watched her from the corner of my eye. I tried to see the changes in her that must have been there. I failed to see them. She looked like the same Natalie I had been married to for over 14 years, but she no longer acted like her. She was different, more moody, less talkative. her eyes rarely meeting mine for any time, her manner more abrupt. She was much less active in bed and rarely initiated intimacy now, where before she was always in the mood and usually took the initiative more than I did, and I enjoyed that. I got tired of always having to be the aggressor. None of that showed when I looked at her from the corner of my eye, and since she no longer trusted herself to look me in the eye, I was unable to see it then. By 11, I was tired, and I needed sleep. Actually, I wanted the forgetfulness that sleep would bring. I told her I was tired and left to go up to bed. I took a shower to wash the stink of betrayal off and crawled into bed, sad and depressed. I closed my eyes and sent a prayer to God to make all of this nothing but a bad dream. I prayed with all I had but felt nothing different. I felt the tears again, but this time I fought them no more. I was almost asleep when I felt Natalie climbing beside me. I controlled my breathing to make her think I was asleep and tried not to tense up as she moved against me and put one arm over my hips. I felt her breathe on my shoulder, but stopped any response. She whispered my name, but again I let my breathing continue unchanged. She tried to wake me by moving her body. I began counting to 1,000 by fours and was able to control any response. She finally gave up, rolled over onto her back, and became quiet. I was almost asleep when I heard the soft crying. At one time, that would have brought me out of a sound sleep to rush to her aid. Tonight, it simply made me go cold. The following morning, I mentioned to Natalie that I had a guy coming to give us an estimate on installing a security system. We had talked about it for some time, so Natalie was okay with that. I called Jeff and told him to come ahead, and he said he would be there right after lunch. I told Natalie I would drive home to let him in so she could stay at work. Now all Jeff had to do was install whatever stuff he wanted. I just wanted it done. This was killing me, and so far, I had nothing but suspicions based on conversations between Natalie and Karen. The next few nights were similar to that night when I resisted. Natalie was becoming anxious, but I just told her I was too tired and too involved in a big new job at work. Since Dad died, I was running the whole company, but I had trained men to do the important jobs, leaving me with a lot of time now. I preferred to work rather than take the time to be with Natalie. That was the strain I was feeling, but I didn't tell her that. I either went to bed early so I could pretend sleep when she came up, or I waited till she fell asleep and then either slid into bed or stayed downstairs on the couch. My life was now a living hell, but I had to know the truth. Jeff called on a Friday to tell me that so far nothing had showed up on his equipment. He asked me if I could schedule a trip out of town for at least 6 days and nights. I said I could, so he said to set it up. I did as he requested. I came home the following Monday night and waited till after the kids were asleep to spring it on Natalie. Natalie, I need to tell you something. I've got to go out of town for a few days to meet with some clients on a potential job. It's big and could keep the place working for almost a year. They'll fly out tomorrow evening and then be able to come home on Friday. They'll just be gone 6 nights. Natalie looked angry at my words. She seemed to be trying to decide how to answer me and finally looked at me, actually looked directly at me, something she had not been doing for some time. I guess she had a basis for anger directed at me and felt justified. That almost made me laugh, but I resisted the urge. Well, it's nice of you to give me some warning today. What am I supposed to do with Anna and Jake? Did you think of that? Well, I've been taking care of them now on Thursdays when you and your girlfriends go out and stay out till after they go to bed. I work all day, then take care of them at night, but I don't see you doing the same for me. When have I ever asked you to watch them so I could have a night out? I was rewarded with a pained look when she realized the position she put herself in with her complaint. I saw the flush of blood to her face before she turned away, letting her handle that. You're right. I guess I have been unfair to you. I am sorry. It'll be fine when you go. It's important, I know, or you wouldn't do it. We'll get your mom to help out. She'll love that. Good. I'm glad you're okay with it. I have to pack tonight, so we'll leave directly from work. I was afraid my sarcasm would start an argument I didn't want to have, but Natalie didn't seem to notice. That night was the hardest so far. Natalie wanted to be intimate before I left, but I had to plead fatigue and worry. I told her to give me this week to make the decision on this job, and then I would be able to stop worrying and be my normal self. She took it hard, and again I heard her crying after she thought I was asleep. Her tears didn't make any impression on me now. I decided that if I came back and Jeff told me things were okay, and Natalie did nothing while I was gone, I would end this whole thing and get my wife back if he found nothing. That was a big if in my mind. I left the following day as planned. Actually, I checked into a hotel 60 miles away and stayed there for the next 6 days. I called Natalie on my cell phone several times a day while I was gone. I particularly called her on Thursday when she would be out doing whatever she and Karen had been doing, but her cell was strangely quiet. All I got was a voicemail message saying not available and leave a message for me to return. I left a message telling her that she must be doing something very important not to take my call. Maybe I had gone too far, but somehow the anger reached out and grabbed me by the throat. Jeff told me not to call him, he would call me. So I waited and worked on some estimates that were actually fairly big. The time dragged by. When Jeff finally did call, it was the day before I was to fly home. He wanted me to come into the office as soon as I could. I checked out of my hotel and drove the 60 miles back to see Jeff. I wish now that I hadn't. What he had for me was worse than I could imagine. But now the truth was mine. I knew what she was doing, who she was doing it with, and I was shocked. As I sat in Jeff's office, he showed me pictures of Natalie with David Jones and another man I didn't know. There were pictures of her with each of them, each man being intimate with her. There were pictures of her between them. In several of the pictures, Karen was also present, doing things I had only dreamed of, even with our active intimate life. I had never done some of the things I saw her do with David Jones, and it made me sick. Sick with anger, sick with rage. Jeff said nothing as I ran toward the bathroom to get sick. He sat behind his desk as he listened to me retching into his sink. He stood as he saw me stagger back into the room, my face pale with the remaining sickness of watching my wife's betrayal. He sat down as I slumped into the chair. He said nothing as I gathered my courage to ask, "Where were my children? I know these were taken in my bedroom. Where were my children?" I feared the answer but held out hope that she wasn't that evil. "With your mother." "They weren't there, John. Rest easy on that." "When did this happen?" "Thursday night." "Did she do it on the other nights as well?" "No, this was the only time she had them at your house. That was the second night you were gone. I listened to one of them tell the other shed never allowed him to come there before. He was so damn happy to be doing that in her husband's bed. I got that on tape. That was from that Mark guy. He's a real piece of he's a real bad man. I want his ass, Jeff. What can we do to nail him? I know adultery isn't a crime, so what can I do to nail his ass?" I was furious and wanted to kill David Jones, but I didn't want to do time for killing a son of a bitch like him. I just wanted him gone. "I know some guys. Just leave it to me. ITLL cost you an extra $6,000. That okay?" "Not a problem. They'll pay what it takes to get that son of a bitch. Just do it, Jeff. Please, get him. Give me a week. Talk to your lawyer if you're going to, and have your papers ready to serve in 1 week. They'll take care of the wise ass. Leave it to me. Just get me the cash in small bills so I can buy what I need. And John, you gotta trust me. Can you do that?" "I trust you, Jeff. More than I trust the woman I loved, the mother of my children." I stayed with Jeff that evening, and the four of us finished off a bottle of whiskey. I woke the next day lying on the floor of a one-room apartment. I gathered it was Jeff's as he was snoring away in a pull-down Murphy bed. I got up, washed as best I could, and woke him long enough for him to tell me my car was downstairs. I drove to work, spent a few hours there, and then, when it was time, drove home. I was rumpled enough to convince Natalie that I had spent a few hours on a plane after meeting early with the clients. Jeff convinced me that I needed to back off my avoidance and spend the next week with my wife, treating her as my loving wife, not as a cheating woman. She couldn't know I was on to her because she might tell Mark, and that would wreck his plans. It was hard, but when I thought about it, I decided I would use the time to remember what it was like before. The problem was that I still loved her. Even if she had cheated on me, that love would die slowly over time. But for now, it was alive and well and punishing me for finding out the worst. It hurt. God, how it hurt. The love I had for her still was so strong. The pain of betrayal was excruciating. That first night home was the hardest. I played with my kids, helped her put them to bed, then spent the evening with my wife, telling her about the job, and then going up to bed with her to be intimate for the first time in weeks. And I did make love to her. I still loved her, and I had been faithful to her for all of our marriage. I had no guilt to hold me back. I made love to her like it was the first time. This time, when she cried, it was because it had been so beautiful. I made love with every touch, every kiss, every moment. She responded. Her body gave her no choice. I worried at first about STDs and even AIDS, but as I thought about it, for some reason, I didn't care. So what? I might die. What was I doing now? At least it felt like death, the death of my marriage, and the perfect life I thought we shared. As the week progressed, I thought more and more about my life without Natalie. What about Anna and Jake? What would they think when we were separated? How would we arrange visitation? Who should have them? That part was easy. When she brought 4 men and another woman into my home for intimacy, that made the decision easy. I was going for full custody, and I would use the pictures Jeff had for leverage. I began to accept the end of my marriage, but what it brought with it was sadness. I found myself crying for no reason during the day and often at night. I was listless at work, got angry for the stupidest reasons, and dreaded going home each evening. I had begun to spend more and more time at work, getting home well past dinner. Natalie noticed, but between my renewed vigor in the bedroom and my strange behavior at other times, she was just confused. I had been working with my lawyer to get the terms of the divorce worked out. I wanted to be sure that whatever we did, the kids would not suffer. I planned for college funds, medical coverage, support, and all the things that went into raising children. I had planned originally on both of us working together to do what was best for our kids. Now I had to plan for joint decision-making and how to make it work. The joint bank accounts and savings accounts were of little consequence. We weren't wealthy by any stretch, so those accounts were small. We each had our own 401k plans, and while mine was funded as was my Social Security, I would accept no claims from her on any of my own investments. In my proposal, she gave up any claims to my future with her betrayal. I made considerably more than Natalie did, and I accepted I would have to provide some alimony, but I tried to make it as small as possible. Not to make her life miserable. I just didn't want to pay her for cheating on me with other men. Let her work to earn the money to pay for her new life. I wanted no part of that. And maybe she could go into partnership with Karen, and the 4 of them could run an escort service. They could make a bundle doing that. That brought up another thing: what to do about Steve. Should I give him what I had that showed Karen? It seemed to me he should know the truth about his wife. I talked to Jeff about that, and he suggested an anonymous envelope dropped off at Steve's place of business. It was probably likely that he would know who sent it, but I liked that idea and told him to arrange it. He had all the details now and told me to sit tight until the following Monday. That was D-Day. I finished the week out, Natalie and I being intimate 6 times that week. The interesting thing was that she didn't go out on her girls' night with Karen that week. I was curious, so I called Jeff, and he told me she met Mark twice during the week at lunchtime. He said they left to go to a motel on Wednesday, but nothing since. I thought back to that Wednesday, and we didn't make love that night. Natalie pleaded a headache, and I accepted that. When we did make love on Friday, I thought no more about it. I knew now that regardless of what she did, Natalie was not going to stay faithful to me in the future. She had made a life for herself of deception and cheating, and that was now part of her life. I determined that I would allow her to make it all of her life. I would not be a factor for her anymore. I told her Sunday evening when we were in bed that I had to go to Chicago Monday. It would be a short trip, leaving Monday afternoon and returning Tuesday evening, just the night. No big deal. Natalie made a small fuss, but nothing major. She accepted it, and then we made love for the last time. I knew it, but she didn't. I gave it all I had, knowing this was the end of my time with Natalie. She had at least 4 climaxes, and she was sobbing with pleasure by the time I was done. I made love to her, putting all of my love and desire for her into it. I gave her my whole self that night, just as I always had. All she could give me was what she had left after her other lovers. It didn't matter. I still wanted her. I had been true to her for our entire marriage, and I was going to end it with a clear conscience. That brings us to that Monday when I stood outside the city complex where she worked and waited with Jeff for Sam and the police. This was it. The children were already with my mom. I had spent an hour with her letting her know what I was going to do and why. I showed her one picture to convince her, but nothing more. I wouldn't do that to Mom. Natalie's parents were far away, and her dad had Alzheimer's, and her mother was not well, so neither of them would know anything unless she told them. That left only me, Steve, and Karen. Steve's envelope was being delivered at this very moment. Karen was at home, as she always was. Jeff pointed and said, "There they come. There's Sam, and there's Officer Simmons. It's showtime." Jeff looked at me once more, his eyebrows raised in question. I simply nodded to him. He smiled and then went to work. Sam walked up, spoke briefly to Jeff, and then walked into the complex. He was carrying 4 envelopes, and he knew where to go. I followed behind but stayed out of sight. The officer waited outside. His job was to come later. Sam quickly walked down the hall, turned into an alcove where a waist-high counter separated 6 women from the area in front. A sign above them stated building permits. There was a man leaning against the counter talking to one of the women. Sam walked up to that woman, stood beside David Jones, and asked her if she was Natalie Harrison. She said she was, and he handed her one of the envelopes. "You have been served." She looked at him in confusion, but took the envelope. He stepped back, looked at David Jones, and asked him if that was his name. Mark nodded, also slightly confused. He pushed the remaining envelope at Mark and said, "You have been served." He turned and walked rapidly away, nodding to me as he passed. I watched Natalie's face carefully from my position just out of her sight. She opened the envelope, pulled out the documents, read the first page, and looked at the picture attached with a paperclip. Suddenly, her face paled, her hands began to shake, and her mouth opened in a silent cry. She fell forward onto the counter, the envelope and its contents falling to the floor. I watched as tears began to fall, and she continued to try to scream. Finally, she found the breath, and an ear-splitting scream blasted the quiet of the area. As soon as that happened, she slid slowly down behind the counter. David Jones had also looked at his document. It named him as a correspondent in an alienation of affection suit, and also had a picture attached. It made a claim on his business and included a restraining order barring him from contact with Natalie, my home, or place of business. Natalie would find a similar restraining order in her documents, barring her from our home and the children until such time as a visitation schedule could be worked out. Mark's face grew dark with anger, and his arrogance showed as he pushed the documents back into the envelope and turned to stomp out of the building. I stayed back as he passed, then I followed him at a distance as he walked down the hall and out through the front doors, right into the hands of the officer. I moved quickly to the open door to hear the officer say, "David Jones, you are under arrest for grand theft. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to remain silent and to have an attorney. If you can't afford an attorney, one will be appointed for you. Do you understand these rights?" Mark struggled, but finally said he understood. The officer and his partner hauled Mark down the stairs to their patrol car and pushed him in the back. Funny, they didn't protect his head, which hit the top of the door rather hard. I heard an oops from the partner. Jeff later explained to me that there had been a series of thefts from several of the local shops. Strange thing was that all of the stolen merchandise was found in one of David Jonas' trucks. It had been verified and would be returned to the places from which it had been stolen. A warrant was issued for his arrest, and one of Jeff's contacts was able to tell the officer where Mr. Morris could be found. I walked back inside and down the hall toward Natalie's section. I stopped in front of the counter and looked around for her but didn't see her. Then I saw several of the girls clustered around a chair where I assumed she was sitting, so I walked around the counter and went back there. I pushed my way past several of the women to see Natalie sitting with her head down and her shoulders slumped in defeat. It was a bittersweet sight, and not one I wished for anyone to have to see. In a cold voice, any emotion I felt savagely suppressed, I said, "Don't come home tonight. There is a restraining order included with your copies that forbids you to come anywhere near me, the children, or the house until conditions are changed by the courts. Let me know where to send your things." At my voice, Natalie looked up at me, but I gave her no chance to say anything as I delivered my planned speech. Her face was pale, her eyes bloodshot from crying, and her mouth was partly open, her lower lip quivering. I loved her at that moment as much as I ever had, but I was also sick at the sight of her. She listened to my speech and then spoke in a voice strained and on the verge of collapse. "I'm so sorry, John. I love you more than my own life. I'm so very sorry." I looked at her. Now, after I had done all I planned, I was numb at that point, So all I said was, "So am I." As my control threatened to fail me, I pulled off my wedding ring and dropped it on the floor in front of her. I kept my promises. I walked quickly away before I lost it and went back outside to find Jeff. He was standing in the same spot, watching the officer and his partner, Sam, talking together. They turned, waved, and then left. As they drove away, Jeff turned to me and asked, "Well, was that what you wanted?" I looked at him. Yes, it was, and I didn't enjoy any of it. How about that? Am not one damn bit surprised. He looked at me, laid one huge hand on my shoulder, then walked away. I watched him get into his little Mustang and drive away. Less than a month after it all came down, Steve and Karen put their house up for sale. The day before, a moving van came to take their furniture away. Steve stopped to speak to me. I went out and stood with him, watching Karen as she directed the movers. He hesitated, then spoke. "I know it was you that sent me the envelope. Was there more?" He was not looking at me, but I knew he was waiting for my answer. I remembered Jeff's advice. I looked at Karen, and just then, she looked over, meeting my eyes. She couldn't hold them. I decided what to tell him. "There was more, but I won't give it to you. You need to decide what you want to do. As someone once told me, if this is all you know, there is a chance for your marriage to survive." He nodded once, turned, and walked away. I never saw or spoke to either of them again. David Jones was indicted and found guilty of grand theft. Because he refused to admit his guilt, the court sentenced him to 10 years. He began serving his sentence a month ago. He continues to claim he had no idea where that stuff came from. 6 months later, I received the final divorce papers. It was on a Friday of all days, the night Natalie and Karen went out for their girls' night out. It seemed like so little that ends so much, just a set of papers stating that the marriage was dissolved and that an equitable distribution of assets had been agreed to by all, and that custody of the minor children was to be shared. Just like that, one part of my life was ended. I sat in my office and considered the end of the last 14 years of my life. Natalie had a small apartment across town and had seen the kids every weekend until we finally agreed on shared custody. With the divorce final, I had them during the summer months, and Natalie had them during the school year. In order to make things better for the kids, I took Natalie's apartment, and she moved back into the house with the kids. Anna was in 4th grade now, and Jake was just starting in preschool. Mom lives with me during the summer to help me take care of them. Mom also volunteered to help Natalie whenever she needs help, but I had no idea who else Natalie had to help her. Natalie and I do talk occasionally, and we try very hard not to discuss the past. She still tries to get me to let her explain what happened, but I get angry when she does, so she finally stopped. She tried to talk to me before the divorce became final, but I refused. I couldn't do it. I knew I would break down and give in if I did. It was harder on me than she knew to let her go, but I had no choice. Marriage is based on trust and mutual commitment, and Natalie had broken those vows and destroyed our marriage. I still loved her, of course. Nothing would change that. Unconditional love was in my genes, apparently. I couldn't stop loving her regardless of what she did. So I had no choice but to avoid her as much as possible. I look back on our years together, and I remember the good times. That was easy when I was with my kids. They represented all that was good and pure. I try not to think of the bad. I remember also the words of a very smart man, Jeff Harris. He told me that if I took the path I chose, I would have no chance to save my marriage. I wonder still why I chose to go the way I did. What if I had confronted her? What if I had forced her to choose? Would she have chosen me and our marriage? Even if she had, what would have stopped her from doing the same thing sometime in the future? I just knew that I would always wonder what she was doing every time things weren't just right. But still, I wonder. I wonder every night as I go home to be alone. The question I keep asking myself is simple. Now that I got exactly what I wanted, why am I not content? Consequences can be a bitch for both sides.